Welcome to Design Discipline. My name is Mehmet Aydın Baytaş. I'm a scholar of design and I am proud to present to you our very first proper episode. Design Discipline is a new publication where we will be covering different worlds and facets of design, including perspectives like business and craftsmanship and scholarship and personal growth. Some episodes of Design Discipline will be conceptual. These will be ideas and insights that are synthesized from experiences and academic literature and a wealth of resources on design and business and so on. Other episodes will be conversations with world-class creators and leaders and scholars whose work relates to design. So I am proud to present to you as our very first episode my conversation with Carl-Johan Lindqvist, who is co-founder of the Gothenburg-based design studio Lundgren+Lindqvist. The kinds of work that Lundgren+Lindqvist create include visual identity design, art direction, print, packaging, signage, web development, and in all of these domains, they consistently produce work that, in my opinion, sets the bar in terms of taste and sophistication. They rightfully describe themselves as a design studio with purpose and precision, and in our conversation with Carl-Johan, we unpack exactly what they mean by that. We discuss their inspirations and philosophy and process and tactics, their advice to younger generations, and the tensions between business, technology, and craftsmanship that define the creative professions today. If you enjoy this conversation, you can follow the Design Discipline podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, visit our blog, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Across these channels, we publish concepts and conversations that are meant to inspire and enrich creative work. This particular conversation is available as a podcast and also as a video, which we shot on location at the beautiful offices of Lundgren+Lindqvist. On our website and our pages on Instagram and Twitter, you'll find visual summaries of the insights that we distilled from this conversation. This is a beautiful space you have. Can you tell us a bit about your office?
Yeah, sure. So we're in Klippan or Röda Sten in Majorna in Gothenburg, Sweden. This is the sockerbruket, or the old sugar factory or sugar mill, which I think, as far as I know, was part of the Porter Brewery, which was next doors. There was the Carnegie Porter was brewed in the building next to us, and most of the sugar went to the Porter. Since I guess a number of years back, there's basically only offices. There's some artist space still, some studios, but more and more companies like ourselves. So design and the type of technical architects. There's some visualization companies, etc. We like it here. We've been here, I think, about 8 years, and overlooking the kind of harbor entrance to Gothenburg, which feels close enough to home, but still looking away as well. So that's nice.
So when I find myself designing anything that appears on a screen or on a page, any kind of graphic design, any kind of web design, what I do is I go to your website and I steal as much as I can. I look up to your work a lot. So I'm wondering who you look up to. Are there any people, companies, projects that inspire you today?
There's a multitude of places we go to get inspired ourselves, just like you do. Of course, it's part of our kind of studio culture in a way to embrace new ideas and look at what other people in our sphere are doing, and then at the same time we do very much avoid copying others. I think a lot of times we go back further, and our references often are more historical than current in a way. We look for pieces that we like that go a long way back, maybe in time, in order to avoid just doing what everyone else is doing. So we speak of cultural awareness, or being aware of your the kind of sphere we're in, and the general kind of design world where it is now. But we also want to look back and kind of bridge what is happening now with kind of what goes back in the past. So in terms of looking up to people, there are both kind of the historical masterminds in our heads, some of the Swiss masters of graphics design, and and the Dutch masters as well. And then there's a lot of very good designers they're currently active. Those that bridge engineering and tech with design, where we are also in that kind of sphere, especially myself as a front-end designer and developer. So personally, one of the names that I often come back to is Hakim El-Hattab, who's a front-end developer and engineer. I think he's originally from, I believe, Stockholm, but now lives in New York since many years back. He works on a project of his own, or product of his own called Slides, I think. But he's done a lot of really inspiring kind of everything small to large kind of front-end bits. So I often find myself going to his website, looking at what he's doing now. He's got a lot of like small little pieces that you can look at. It's everything from like a simple, but something very. A lot of the things he shares are very small in scope in a way. It's just like maybe a button that appears in an interesting way, or an interesting way of navigating a list of items or something like that.
Since you mentioned historical resources now, I was planning to ask you a question which I usually save for a later point in these interviews, but I'll ask it now. I usually ask book recommendations from people. And when I met you earlier, I had asked you for one, and you recommended that I have a look at the Grid Systems for Graphic Design, Müller-Brockmann, from Swiss graphic design. And I've actually bought that book since then, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a beautiful book, and it's also a very interesting source of information, both covering the theory of layouts and type-heavy graphic design, and also the tactics of it. Can you give us some more recommendations? What other books or resources should I check out?
Obviously, the Swiss tradition that Müller-Brockmann was a part of, and the grid systems and everything like that was a huge inspiration for us early on. We believe very much in understanding the rules before you can break them in a way. So we wanted to learn, and it's also the fact that none of us have a traditional schooling. We're self-taught in this field, or in both fields, so design and development. So the Grid Systems in Graphic Design was a very good resource. There's a similar resource that we recommend to all our employees, even like disregard if you do development or design as your primary task. And it's a very thin book called Detail in Typography. Highly recommended reading for anyone who use text in their design, which is everyone. So those two combined, I would say, will take you a very long way in understanding and working with the design the way that we do, because we are very type driven. We are very layout oriented in a way. We follow a lot of these kind of best practices set in the 60s and 70s, but we also obviously, since we now know the rules, we're also allowed to break them. It's more now part of the backbone. It's kind of like whenever we do design, we have a grid. It wouldn't make sense to us to design without a grid. But I've often seen students and interns come in and they start designing, and there's either no grid at all, or there's a grid which is basically pixels, or like the kind of dotted grid that you see in some software, which means anything aligns all the time because there's a grid line everywhere. And then I tell them that is not a grid in the essence that we think of a grid. Just aligning things to any line isn't helpful. What you can do with a 12-column grid or a 16-column grid is you can create an interesting layout, and it's very easy for you to try and move things around and see what it works like. So, and then again, the Müller-Brockmann book is a very good source of resource, but I think the Detail in Typography definitely, and then from more my personal experience and from the development side, there's so many books and there's so many resources coming out all the time, and it's hard to write books about web development, for instance, because things change. In a year, there will be new and other ways of doing what you do. I know one specific book, and I think it's available as a PDF these days, and it's a company called 37 Signals who designed a software called Basecamp, which is still used by some for project management. They released a book called Getting Real, which was about their process and how they went about kind of developing applications and sites, and the Getting Real aspect was basically it was about shipping things fast and scoping it down so you can get it out there, test it, see if it works, and then build upon it from there, rather than trying to perfect whatever you're building in a way where it takes so long that once you come to the market, there's someone already doing it, or there's a better way of doing it, or you're obsolete in some other aspect. And I think that taught me a lot, prototyping and getting things to a state where you can do client reviews and also user reviews and user testing. Basically making sure that you share what you do as soon as you can, rather than sitting, in your own little shop and hammering on it for far too long. It's probably almost 10 years since it came out and I read it, but from what I remember, I would think it still has relevance, because again, there was very little about specific techniques or how to do things. It was more about the overall approach.
You brought up some very interesting points that I will return to. I just want to explore some more general things, just getting to know you and your company a little bit more before I dive into those specifics. So when we look at your work, we see that your design practice is quite focused. You do web design, you do graphic design. There's a particular genre that you occupy, but your clients are quite diverse. Can you, in your own language, describe the kind of value that you're creating in this genre and for these clients?
We say in our website that we do design and development, and we also say that we do design and development with purpose and precision. The precision bit is what you see in the work in terms of like how it's executed. So the actual craft of creating something, be it digital or a physical piece like a business card or a website. The precision is in a sense the graphic design bit, and then we also do the purpose. We think a lot about the purpose of what we do, and that is probably more of the strategic side of things, where it's grasping our clients' needs in terms of visual communication, perhaps. A lot of times it's about telling a story or explaining why our client would be different from their competitors, or why it's important for people to interact or connect with a specific brand, or it could also be an organization that has an important message that needs to be conveyed. The value that we can bring is the kind of attraction to your brand or of your brand, primarily from a visual point of view. A lot of other components that go into this mix. So text is one thing that we, that you need to say the right things. We can not just select the nice font and you say whatever you want to say. You also need to say something that aligns with the kind of shape of things. It all needs to align and it all fits a certain purpose. And there's a lot of pieces that we can be more or less involved in, depending on who the client is, what they have when they come to us, and what they do not have. One of the probably most apparent values that we bring to our clients is the outside perspective, that we can come in and say, you think people think this of you, but in fact, when we look at things and we talk to people around you, or our interpretation of your brand is something different, and we need to align these so that you see what others see and they see what you see. again, then we come in and we, sometimes we execute more of a visual approach. So we work with the graphics and everything. Sometimes we do more of maybe a service. So we build something that, our clients can use and build a connection with the company or brand. The work we present in our website is often, very visual, and where we've had a chance to work on both sides, kind of both digital and design. I would say most of our clients buy into our way of seeing things. So the value that we add is our perspective, and our what we can give them is design or a look, but it's also very much a story. And even though we often work on a design system, and we will create a brand book with all the rules again around typography and color and so forth, many times that is almost secondary to the primary kind of delivery that we do, which is the kind of underlining story of why you should look this way. We need that for our own process, but the client also need that in order to receive and be able to work with what we then present as kind of, assets in terms of graphical assets. You need to understand how and why you would use them. That little piece inside that is the key to everything in a way. And then the next delivery is obviously more kind of tangible. It's like here is typographic rules for your company. I think we are a bit reluctant to verbalize too much about this strategy bit. There's also other companies that call themselves a strategic design firm, where we've gone down that route. We've done a couple of projects where we spent a lot more time and resources on defining certain things and sending over documents of 80 pages PDFs. Today we try to balance things and find just enough research, just enough strategy, and then move on to what we really like to do is the visuals and the building things out and to get to that phase fairly quickly. But I'm also very cautious about not going there too quickly, and ensuring that our designers primarily maybe don't jump too straight into picking the font and opening the software and trying to design things. This goes for maybe more interns and younger designers. They learn eventually, but a lot of times I tell them you're probably not there yet in terms of like opening the document and defining the whatever size you're working on. You should be sketching on pen and paper, or you should be looking at books or talking to the client more. That is a big part of the work as well.
Yeah, back in the day, I also got started in design and in software with designing websites. At that time, it was very straightforward. We made these things, and people would we would assume they would be in their homes or in their offices in front of a screen looking at this thing. But today, the media is much more diverse. Very tiny screen sizes to like these huge 30, 40-inch monitors or TV screens, and also the contexts in which people consume or interact with these things. So there is almost limitless possibilities in terms of how these things appear in front of the end consumer or the end audience.
Yeah.
And in contrast, design is a game of constraints and limitations. To design means to go into this infinite world, and you pick various constraints and limitations, and you end up with one particular thing. You pick one particular color, one particular typeface, one particular layout, and you end up with one thing. In order to get to this ultimate particular artifacts when you create, what are some constraints that you choose to impose on yourself?
Today, one of the major differences from working with graphic design 15 years ago, even as far as maybe 10 or even less, before responsive, before smartphones, everyone was doing websites in 960 pixels. We were actually kind of endorsed for doing great 960 pixels designs, and we were really pixel perfect everything. People came to us because it looked really pixel perfect, and we struggled a bit when our first clients who received kind of responsive design from us, because they were like, no, we wanted this thin little socket of everything in one tube, and we're like, no, that's not how you build a website these days. It's like, but that's what you show on your website, and that's what we think of you in a way. So we had a year or two maybe of like explaining to people why they needed to be responsive and why the website needed to work in a smartphone as well as on a laptop, for instance. Nowadays it's more sometimes someone asks like, and it will work on mobile, and yes, it will. That is for us obvious. That since we first got our first iPhones that were like jailbreaked from the US, we realized there's no going back. This is how we will be working, and this is how we will interact with web in the future, basically. When I speak of responsive layout, responsive design, the obvious connotation is the web, and you sit and you drag your screen and you test like, how does it work here? How does it work here? And sure, that's one aspect of it. But I say also like responsive design is also business card to billboard. So how does this company reflect on a business card, and how do I make sure that I can tell when I hold up the business card next to the billboard that this is the same company? And again, we come down to typography, color, but also layout. How do we work with the type? How do we work with the colors? How you position the elements can be very much part of the how you create that connection between the billboard and the business card and the mobile web and the kind of full scale web, or like the cinema display or whatever. So I think it's this is why we often come back to these kind of small pieces in a way, but they're key components to any layout. And if you've defined those correctly in your design program or design system, then the final piece, or the artifact, no matter the format, device, or size, you will instantly relate that to the brand.
One of the courses that I teach at the university is called mobile computing. So I actually teach some of this stuff that we're talking about. And what I believe in and what I also teach is similar to what you said, that a lot of universal knowledge in graphic design that applies to business cards, to billboards, it's the same things that apply to phones or tablets, or designing for responsive design and all of that. For example, when smartphones first came out, people were all about skeuomorphic design, where your button had to look like a real actual button with the shadows and the lights at play, and when you press it, it had to like appear concave on the screen and so on. And then more recently, as media became more diverse, people turned to flat designs and these what they call material design, what Google calls material design, which is more or less flat with a little bit of sort of simulation added, I guess. So I do believe that, and I also teach that universals of graphic design and of design going back to maybe 50 or 100 years are even more relevant today due to this particular state of technology that we're in. And I think you corroborated that when you said responsive design is, business card to billboard, but also mobile phone to, huge TV screen. But still, in the digital world, the diversity of so many different devices, so many different screens, and maybe we're getting to glasses right now. Is this something that is significant in your practice? For example, are you doing something today in your practice that is uniquely enabled by this kind of technology, this kind of situation? Or is there anything that you would like to do, but is sort of hindered?
I come from a background of graphic design and doing, in a more flat physical design. So I would design posters or leaflets or physical pieces. one of the things I really miss as a designer and working with front-end development or development today is the fact that there was a final end to my design process when I sent something to a printers and they would print it. And part of the process was sending it to ship it and to finalize it. And I can't touch it after this time. There was a finite end to the design process. Whereas today in our, in the digital sphere, nothing is ever final. There can always be a pushback, or there can always be new comments or new ideas come in anytime in the process. It ties back to, again, the purpose of what we do. That unless we are clear and confident in what we are making, because everything is possible. It's comes down to ones and zeros. Yeah, I can change anything. I can change the font. I can change the color. I can also change the complete layout. But if I know what I'm working on, what I have been spending time on, I can say with my back straight is like, yeah, I could change whatever you ask for, but this is not the time, or this is not the. Whatever comment you have does not align with what we have defined as kind of the purpose of this piece that we're working on. So I think connecting ourselves and our clients and everyone in the process around the purpose helps kind of finalizing certain things and making sure that it is not watered down in the end, because that is the fear that I always kind of carry through a project until we get like final sign off. And this is also why I recommend the Getting Real book and shipping things and getting things out there. And it's also why I will, if you come to us as a client and we build you something, I will be pushing to get things out the door, to get things live, to get things up there. Not because I want to bill you and leave you. It's because I want to know that once we present something and we go live with something, there will be comments, there will be discussion whether this was right or wrong, and I'm happy to have that discussion. But I want to have it when we've at least aligned ourselves to one particular piece and we went with it. So I think that is the and again, this is it was a nice thing when I was working with physical design. You would send it to printers, and you could say to the client as well. The client could come with comments, and I could say, no, it's done. It's sent to the printers. We can't it's already in production. We can't do anything about it. It was good for everyone, I think, and that process is kind of lacking now. We don't really have, at least for us, I think maybe this is why some companies have very rigid processes around design and working with something like Scrum methodology or some sort of method in order to kind of simulate the same thing, because otherwise we can be hacking on things forever. This is the gift and the curse of where we are now. So in a way, it also answers your initial question of what is something that we couldn't do before, or what is something that we can do anything now. As compared to before, we were limited by what the printer could do, or what paper we needed to print on, or what size it could be, or budget would come into play, because there's a finite sum of money that we can spend on printing something. Whereas now, obviously, budget comes into play because I want to get paid for my work, but there's not too many other things where the budget can get spent in a way. I'm somewhat fascinated about the time that things were allowed to take before, just because of the how the craft was executed. I think that was that had value in the design that was the outcome of that process was more thought of, just because it took longer to get to as a society. I don't think this is anything encapsulated in our kind of spheres. Like, it's in everywhere. Like, things go so fast today that it's hard to take a step back and reevaluate or think of what we're doing. I think in general is again a gift and a curse. It's great. We carry around a full encyclopedia and much more in our pocket. But it's also something that we have to keep in mind, that certain things must take time. And we also say to our clients that time is a very important aspect of our work, because sometimes we need to work on things and then we need to let it be for a little while, and we need to think of it in the back of our heads. We need to come back to it in a few days or a week, because that's when we can look at it from other angles and from other perspectives. And if you just dig into something and you work with it for a week straight or a month straight or whatever, you'll get blindsided. Time is a very important aspect, and I think that's something, again, that as a society we don't really respect that a lot these days. Everyone wants everything now. It's one thing that we need to be wary of as designers or creators of anything or makers of anything, and probably as human beings in a more general sense.
So you miss being done, in a way.
Yeah, you can phrase it like that. Yeah.
And I'm wondering about your definition of being done in a particular way. So what I mean is, if I come to you, let's say, as a client, let's say I'm starting a business and I have nothing. I don't have a logo. Maybe I don't even have a name. I certainly don't have a website. I haven't picked a typeface, anything, and I need a whole brand identity. What's a checklist? What are, let's say, I don't know, 5 or 10 items that have to be done, like logo, typeface, all of that? What does that involve? And if that checklist is too big, or if it's hard to define, what is a resource, for example, a book that we can consult to in order to find this out?
But one of the things that we are sure that we will make sure that we deliver is this kind of red thread, or some kind of concept around the visualization of your brand or company, or yourself, if it's it can be personal, kind of one single person studio or business. A logo would most likely be one of the resources, or one of the assets that we do. You need an avatar. So the traditional word mark with your name typed out might not cut it as a logo anymore. It might not be enough. So you would most likely pair it with some sort of mark or icon that fits into the Instagram square or Twitter circle or something like that. The typographic program, even if it's sometimes as simple as one typeface, one weight, one size, that is obviously then that is the program you need. Most likely a color palette or color scheme. Again, it can be monochrome, but some side of thought of color. Those, and then paired with layout and grid or something like that. That is essentially kind of a minimum for us. And in order then to execute that and to deliver that, we will need to do, I would say, a minimum of a couple of pieces that utilize these. So it can be a website and a business card, for instance. We will present you with some kind of document that summarizes how we see you working with these elements. That is a first step, and then yes, I miss being done, and I like when we can keep things to a limited set of time, just because it's easier for everyone in the process to start, work and finish. And then we have clients that we've worked with for 10 years now, but we've worked with them on projects in specific scopes in specific given time over those 10 years. And that is for both our clients and ourselves, that is a really great collaboration where we will get to know them. A lot of times, some of the clients, we know probably the brand better than anyone at the client, because everyone left their jobs and we're still here. I find myself being the most senior in terms of having worked with a certain brand in a lot of meetings, because some of the clients that we work with, most of the people have shifted jobs or shifted positions, and I'm still there. But then that is a great asset, where we are an asset to the company. They can actually ask us about how they've done things in the past. The best work we do is when we can have a limited, we can scope it to something tangible and deliverable, be it digital or physical, and we can then execute that, and then we can deliver that, and then we can continue with a new piece of design or something else to produce. But this happens to everyone, where you find yourselves in projects that are never finished. They can't keep expanding. There's no end to it. We've learned to see the signs of this sooner these days, so we can tell, and we can go in and say, wait, hold on, something isn't right here. We need to define something better. So scoping work early on, defining on what is actually being delivered, what is not being delivered. Maybe that is sometimes more important, saying what we won't give you in the first round.
So basically, you're saying software projects are never really done or finished, but they're kind of abandoned, I guess. That's what I like to think. And that's what's happened to me when I've sort of produced software, especially like open source things in the past. And that's why sometimes when I teach topics in software design, I like to at least partially concentrate on the notion of business and entrepreneurship, because that's what makes projects sustainable, in my opinion. If you have a group of people who are being compensated to maintain that software or to keep working on it, that's the only way, unless it's a sort of popular open source project, which has its own challenges and its own world. So I have a few rapid fire questions that I want to ask you, that I kind of ask all of my guests.
Yeah.
One is that, for a young person, maybe a student, let's say, who still has at least 1 or 2 years to go in schooling, for someone who's interested in either joining a design studio like yours, or starting their own, or somehow being productive and effective and successful in this kind of ecosystem that your business is operating in, what are some skills, beliefs, habits that they can develop, that they should have in order to set themselves up for success? And what would be a habit or mindset that they should avoid, that if they have that, it would set them up for failure, for example?
What I would recommend anyone interested in joining a company like ours, or pursuing this type of career, is starting what you did as well. I guess maybe while you were in a student as well, like freelancing. Get jobs. You always have a friend who need a website, or your whatever local football team, or your mom's book club, or whatever it is that needs something. And if it's not like a specific, like, you can invent these things as well, but you need to learn how to work with actual kind of clients and actual companies and actual issues. We're commercial artists, not artists. We need a brief, and we need a client, and we need someone to work for and with. Find places where you can contribute and try out your skill set, I think, is maybe the most important thing. Both me and Andreas come from a background of organizing club nights. So one of the key aspects was creating the posters and flyers for that. So that was one of the places where we could work on graphic pieces that would actually be used and needed. And we then did that type of work for others as well. So if it's not around you, you can then invent it. But I think that is very important. And so on that note, I think the thing you need to avoid is the mindset of thinking that you will be able to avoid kind of hard work. Interns and young students and young people who come here, they can sometimes have an idea of what they would be doing and have a very hard time accepting the fact that that is only part of what we do. You cannot sit in these softwares all the time. You also have to be in client meetings or send emails to people. You have to get acceptance of the work you've done. You don't only sit and create things. And I think that's maybe more so in a studio like ours, where everyone is more or less kind of managing their own projects and their own time. I think also, like, one of the things we struggle with students is that they come from a school, when they come from school, they have no experience of working for clients and meeting deadlines in the way that we have to do. It's often, a quarter of the time or less that we have, that you would have in the university to do the same type of work. And you would have to find ways to cope with that.
Oh, wow. So in your experience, in your professional practice, you have even less time than you have for a university project in order to pull off the project.
Yeah.
Wow.
Considerably less, I would say.
That's really interesting, because that's one of the things that my students complain the most about. They complain about not having enough time to do their projects, to complete all the assignments and so on. So I'm relieved to hear you say this.
Yeah, no,
because they voice that a lot, and I'm like, are we doing it wrong? Are we giving them too much work? So we think that, but now you're saying
I haven't had any of your students come, but no, that I know from going to school myself that. But it was also different. Like some of our teachers or lecturers were much tougher in terms of time, and I appreciated that, because I know that time is not something you have an abundance of in working like we do. It's a good thing to start practicing while in school already, and maybe by finding a few actual clients and projects of your own that you can work with.
The kind of story that you told has very interesting parallels with how I kind of grew up, because I started doing posters and things from my school events. When I was in high school, actually, I used to use GIMP, which is it's kind of a free version of Photoshop.
Yeah.
Not a version, but another piece of software which is free and does the same jobs. And then I learned web programming and web design, and I started working for different clubs and professors at my school. I built a lot of websites for professors. I built a lot of websites for clubs, and then I worked with the Alumni Association, and they recommended me to their acquaintances who had companies. So I worked with law offices and construction companies, just sort of growing out, snowballing from this little network. And then at some point I realized, as a lone programmer or sort of programmer/designer, developer, I have many deficiencies. This can't be a sustainable business for me. Just one person managing all the clients, managing all of these relationships, and dealing with so many different concerns was not a productive career path for me. So that was a failure, kind of, in a way, that I had at that point, because I did fail some projects with certain clients at that point for this reason, because I couldn't handle so many different kinds of work happening. But then later I went on to learn about business and to learn about leadership and how to delegate, how to share the work with different people, how to recruit different skills into your projects. So that kind of set me up for later success, having experienced that little failure in that way. I'm wondering if you've had in your own career a failure or apparent failure which later set you up for success. Do you have, for example, a favorite failure in your professional life?
I know we have an artist friend who he said at some point that he struggled with the fact that the pieces that are presented in a gallery by him are probably like 2 generations back of his own process. So he has already pieces that he's completed in a different angle, and then he's already working on another type of work, and people then come asking for the stuff they see in the gallery now, and he's like, no, that's not where I'm at as a creator and an artist. Like I'm past that kind of that type of work. This is maybe not true for all artists, but a lot of artists, they shift style or shift technique or whatever in order to keep themselves, inspired and everything. And I think to us it's the same thing. So we sometimes struggle with explaining to people that what you see on our website is work done a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It's sometimes even more. It might not have a lot of relevance today. We made loads of bad decisions and we've failed a lot of times. We've always been able to correct that and also come out with something that we think solves the issue or whatever. So it's, I guess that's why we've never really, I don't have one that I can say like, oh, this was this led to this. I think that's significant to our process in general, is that I can rarely say, oh, this was the time and moment that we defined this, and then that was the key to everything. It's more like a gray kind of mash, and then something very good comes out at the end, I hope. But we definitely fail. It would be very strange if we didn't, or in fact, it would mean that we don't put ourselves to any tests. It would mean that we safeguard ourselves all the time, and it would also mean then that we produce work that is safe and not in our kind of sense interesting and pushing boundaries.
You have given us a lot of good advice today. What is some bad advice that you hear in your profession?
If you don't grow, you're actually becoming smaller, which is like, I'm not sure exactly how they phrase it in English, but it's so the sense that your company has to essentially earn more money every year, otherwise something is wrong. I guess, of course, with inflation and everything, yeah, sure, slightly, but you don't have to be in finance in order to run a business. Me and Andreas we founded this company knowing nothing about how to run a company, and we've been successful both at a kind of, in terms of financing and ensuring that we can sustain not only ourselves but also our employees, but always with the putting the work first. If you're starting a business, yes, money is essential in order to have in order to pay your bills and essentially do the work, but you can also put the work first and still be successful in the business side of things.
One thing I've heard, which was a very interesting way of putting it, was that, so they say that growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the cancer cell. And you are advocating rather, you have to be mindful of what your business is about and where it's going and what it's doing and what makes sense for you, and every other business can be different.
Growth might even be hurtful in terms of an artistic or more of it depends on what and I guess you have to decide for yourself whether you want to be in it for the money or the kind of work. Me and Andreas have always said that money is not unessential to us, of course, but end of the day, it's about creating work that we find interesting and that we feel proud of, and that we will, in some way, it's about a legacy and a heritage of our of what we did here and what we want to leave behind in a way.
I really appreciate that. Like I said, I'm quite a big fan of your studio. You are making really beautiful work. You're making both the digital world and the physical world, in my opinion, a beautiful place. And perhaps, beauty or taste is in the eye of the beholder, but that's my impression of what you're doing. And I really appreciate that. Before I conclude this kind of conversation, is there a question that I should be asking you, but I neglected? Is there a question, for example, that you alone in the world are uniquely qualified to answer?
I don't put myself on that kind of horse, I think. So no, in a way. But one thing I can say is that, and this comes from experience and from working within, Lundgren+Lindqvist was formed nearly 15 years ago, and I've freelanced before. I know the feeling of not knowing what you're doing far too well. The imposter syndrome, if you will. Imposter syndrome is very much part of working in our sphere, because there's always another way of doing things. Beauty is subjective. So if I think something looks good and you don't, I can tell you, no, it doesn't look good, or it does look good. You're obviously allowed your opinion, and what I think look good might not look good to you. So already there we have an issue with, there's no defined right or wrong in what we do in design. You are always entitled to your opinion. You have always your subjective view on something. The problem with being a commercial artist is you have to convince someone of your own subjective view, but that comes with the work and the kind of the job. So I think that is something you have to learn and practice as well. I now, after many years, feel fairly confident in saying that I know certain things, and I can, this is something that actually people come to me and no one else for this specific thing. Working with, delivering things to people, whether it's a piece of software or a graphic, like brand identity, whatever, you'll have to learn to cope with people being criticized in what you do. That is part of the job, but you can practice, by actually working with real clients or real people with feelings and thoughts. You'll be practicing this, and you'll need to find the balance again where you listen and where you draw the line, because they also come to you. And for me and Andreas and everyone here, being part of the team has been helpful in a sense where we can say, no, we all think this. We all think this is the best way that we should solve this, or how we should visualize something. And I think that gives everyone here a bit more confidence than they would have if they were working on their own. You might sit alone around a conference table with 4 people representing a client. It's not easy to sit there with your back straight and tell them, no, this is it. This is what we came down to. Something that I think is important for younger designers and developers, or anyone coming into our field, is understanding that you will be criticized at some point. Even you should hopefully also be praised when praise is due. And criticism isn't always a bad thing. It can definitely lead to a lot of new and good innovative ideas. I mean, one of the things you learn with time is how to handle criticism. Me and Andreas would fight over the smallest details. Starting out, it would be how gray or not gray should this text be, or whatever. Whereas now it's somewhat shifted to hopefully because our designs are better in general. So, and it's rarely about the level of gray in the background anymore. It's more about the bigger picture, but you'll have to learn how to pick your battles as well. That's one of the things. Otherwise, any kind of creative work can drain a lot of energy if you fight the wrong battles. Again, it only comes from work experience, I would say. So the sooner you can get into that, the better.
Yeah. So there's no substitute for practice, execution, iteration, and therefore experience. And coming from you, I think a master of tactical execution, I think this advice shines or resonates in a much more powerful way. Thank you for this, and thank you for this whole conversation and your ideas and your insights. And special thanks to Mattias Nilsson, our director of photography today. Thank you for the coffee, Carl-Johan.
Thank you.
This was certainly very nice.
I hope it'll help someone at some point. Thank you.